The demand curve for a resource can shift for various reasons. One of the most basic reasons why it would shift is because that resource's marginal revenue product has changed.
Marginal revenue product is equal to the demand curve for a resource. So if the marginal revenue product of a resource, like labor, changes, the demand for labor would also change. So what are the things that could change marginal revenue product? Well, one of them will be if price of the product changes.
For example, let's say that the business we're talking about produces and sells cotton candy. And let's say that because of some major celebrity endorsement of cotton candy, demand for cotton candy increases.
In the product market for cotton candy, this means that the customers will be willing to pay higher prices for the product. So whereas before, P1 was the highest price the seller could charge to sell Q1 quantity, now with the greater demand for the product, the seller could sell the same quantity for a P2 price.
These higher prices for possible outputs will make total revenue for all possible outputs increase. Therefore, the change in total revenue values will be higher for each worker. The numerator part of the MRP equation will increase for each worker, and the whole MRP curve will shift right.
Since marginal revenue product equals demand for a resource, and the product price increase made the MRP of the resource increase, we can say that an increase in product price will make the demand for the resource that makes that product increase.
Total revenue is price times quantity. In the previous example, it was the price of the product increasing that made the total revenue of each worker increase. Another thing that could change the marginal revenue product of each worker then is if the quantity of output for each worker changed.
The term productivity refers to the average amount of product each unit of a resource makes. In other words, we could say that the productivity of an input, like labor, is defined as the total product, or output of labor divided by the total units of labor, the input.
If the total product of labor were to increase while the amount of labor stayed the same, then we say the productivity of the labor has increased. Basically, if a set amount of labor is able to produce more quantities of product, we say productivity increased.
Or another way to state an increase in productivity is if it takes less inputs to make the same amount of output. So let's say that to make 50 units of output, it took my company 10 workers. That means a productivity rate of 5 units per worker.
But then let's say something happens. Let's say a more efficient manufacturing system is devised so that now the business can make 50 units of output using only 9 workers. That means productivity would go up to 5.55 units per worker, and we call that an increase in productivity.
So, increased productivity means greater output per worker, and therefore increases in productivity will basically make it so that each worker can make more quantities of output. This will make the numerator part of the MRP equation bigger. And of course, when a resource's MRP increases, the demand for the resource increases.
Another factor that can affect the demand for a certain resource is the price of substitute resources and complementary resources. A substitute resource is an alternative resource that a business can use to make their product. So, let's say that the cotton candy business can use either human labor to twirl their cotton candy, or alternatively, they could use machines to twirl the cotton candy. The labor and capital would be substitute resources in this situation.
If the price of a substitute resource increases, let's say the price of machine twirlers increased, then the business would not be as likely to use machines to make their product and would instead use labor. So demand for labor would increase.
Complementary resources are the resources that work together to make a product. So let's say that the machines and humans are both needed to make the product. In other words, it takes a human to operate this cotton candy making machine.
If the price of the machine goes up, the business would not want to purchase as much machinery, and since they are not buying as much machinery, they would not need as much labor to run the machinery.
Therefore, when the price of a complementary resource increases, demand for the subject resource decreases.